Sometimes animals remember love longer than humans expect. Teenage girl once sold her horse to save her family's ranch. She cried the entire night. But 2 weeks later, someone knocked on the barn door at 3 a.m. And standing outside was the horse she had sold after walking 60 miles alone. In the wide open lands of Montana, where the sky seems endless and golden fields stretch farther than the eye can see, lived a 17-year-old girl named Emily Carter. Emily had grown up on a small ranch that had belonged to a family for generations. It wasn't a rich ranch, it wasn't famous, but to Emily, it was the most beautiful place in the world. The ranch had rolling pastures, wooden fences that creaked in the wind, and a small red barn that had stood there longer than anyone could remember. Every sunrise painted the fields in warm gold, and every sunset turned the mountains purple and quiet. It was the place where Emily had spent her entire childhood. But more than anything else, the ranch was the place where she met the animal who would become her best friend, a young brown horse named Dakota. Emily was only 10 years old when her father first brought Dakota home. The horse was young then, still nervous, still learning to trust people. Emily remembered the first day she approached him. She had carried an apple in her small hands. Dakota watched her carefully. For a moment, neither moved. Then, slowly, the horse stepped closer. Emily held out the apple. Dakota took it gently from her hand. And in that moment, a quiet friendship began. From that day forward, Dakota and Emily were rarely apart. She learned how to ride on his back. She learned how to balance, how to guide him, how to trust him. But more importantly, Dakota learned to trust her. They spent hours together riding across the wide Montana fields. Sometimes they raced the wind. Sometimes they simply walked slowly along the riverbank. And on difficult days, when life felt heavy, Emily would sit beside Dakota in the barn and talk to him as if he understood every word. Maybe he did, because whenever she spoke, Dakota always listened quietly, and somehow, she always felt better afterward. But when Emily turned 15, life changed. Her father, a hard-working rancher who had spent decades building the farm, was involved in a terrible accident. A piece of heavy equipment collapsed while he was repairing a fence line. The injury left him unable to walk properly. The strong man who once rode horses across the fields now struggled just to move across the house. Medical bills piled up. Work around the ranch became harder, and the Carter family slowly began to fall behind on payments. Emily and her mother worked tirelessly. They repaired fences, fed the animals, sold what crops they could. But the ranch was struggling, and soon the bank began sending warnings. One evening, Emily overheard her mother speaking quietly on the phone. Her voice sounded tired, worried. After the call ended, Emily walked into the kitchen. Her mother sat silently at the table. There were papers spread in front of her. Bills. Bank notices. Emily looked down at the papers, and then back at her mother. "What are we going to do?" Emily asked softly. Her mother hesitated. Then she said something that made Emily's heart sink. "We may have to sell Dakota." The words felt like a storm inside Emily's chest. "No," she whispered, but her mother's eyes filled with tears. "He's the only valuable animal we have left. If we sell him, we might be able to keep the ranch." Emily understood, but understanding didn't make the pain any easier. The buyer arrived 2 days later. He was a wealthy rancher from another county. He admired Dakota immediately. "He's a strong horse," the man said. "Good build, good temperament." Emily stood quietly beside Dakota as the man inspected him. She gently brushed the horse's mane one last time. Dakota nudged her shoulder softly, almost like he sensed something was wrong. When the moment came to load Dakota into the trailer, Emily wrapped her arms around his neck. Her tears soaked into his thick brown mane. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry." Dakota stood still, calm, watching her with dark, steady eyes. Then the trailer door closed, and the truck slowly drove away. Emily stood in the empty driveway long after the dust settled. And for the first time in years, the ranch felt painfully quiet. Days passed, then a week, then another. Without Dakota, everything felt different. The barn felt empty. The pastures felt silent. Emily still woke up early every morning out of habit, but instead of hearing Dakota's hooves or his soft breathing, there was only stillness. Sometimes she walked into the barn and stood beside the empty stall, just remembering the rides, the laughter, the quiet conversations. She tried to be strong for her parents, for the ranch, but deep inside, she felt like she had lost something that could never be replaced. 2 weeks later, something strange happened. It was 3 o'clock in the morning. The ranch was completely silent. 10 Suden, B-A-N-G. A loud sound echoed from the barn. Emily woke instantly. Another noise followed, a heavy knock against the barn door. Emily grabbed a flashlight and stepped outside into the cold Montana night. The wind rustled through the grass. Her heart pounded as she walked toward the barn. The knocking sound came again. She slowly pulled open the barn door. And then, she froze. Standing there in the moonlight was Dakota, covered in dust. His coat dirty, his legs trembling from exhaustion, but alive and looking straight at her. Emily dropped the flashlight. Dakota, for a moment she couldn't move. Then suddenly she ran forward, wrapping her arms around his neck, crying and laughing at the same time. "You came back. You came home." Dakota rested his head gently against her shoulder, like he had never left. The next morning, the story spread quickly through town. Neighbors came to see the horse that had walked 60 miles to return home. Through mountains, across highways, through cold nights and unfamiliar lands. No one knew exactly how he found his way, but somehow, he did. Even the rancher who bought Dakota was shocked when he heard the news. He drove to the Carter Ranch that afternoon. He watched quietly as Dakota stood beside Emily in the pasture. Then he smiled, while the man said softly, "If a horse walked 60 miles to find you, then I think he already made his decision." He handed Emily the ownership papers. "You keep him, for free." Word of the story spread beyond the town. People were moved by the incredible bond between the girl and her horse. Neighbors began helping the Carter family. Some donated feed, others repaired broken fences. Local businesses even raised money to help pay off the ranch debt. Little by little, hope returned to the Carter Ranch, and every morning, when the sun rose over the fields, Emily rode Dakota once again across the land they both loved. Years later, people still told the story of the horse who walked 60 miles to go home. Not because it was unbelievable, but because it reminded them of something important. La Veille, La Valwes finds its way back, sometimes through storms, sometimes through distance, sometimes through impossible journeys. But it always remembers where home is. Real bonds cannot be sold or replaced. The love we build through kindness, trust, and time becomes something powerful, something that distance can never break. If something you loved deeply returned to you after losing it, would you recognize how valuable it truly was?